Welcome back to Cover Your Assets. We are here live with Derek Walgrave, Todd Rooker, Craig Nestor. CoverYourAssets21.com. You can download our free Financial Crisis Bible. Great way to get to know the guys, the team, how we work, and all the different things that we do here. So we had a great segment with Arliss Richardson, CPA, this hour. Loved having her in here, Craig. And she talked about the government being our partner. But I'd like you to tell me what would happen if the U.S. government was a family right now.
Well, we get a lot of questions about the debt ceiling and the downgrading of credit and all the stuff that you see that's coming through all the media channels. And that's just, if we were to take this and break it down and easy to digest information, if the U.S. government was a family, they're currently making $58,000 a year. Not a whole bunch in 2011, but they're making $58,000 a year, and they're spending $75,000 a year. So they're spending more than they're making. And currently, they have $327,000 in credit card debt. So we look at a family that makes $58,000 a year, spends $75,000, and has $325,000 in debt. Is that family someone you'd want to lend money to?
So China doesn't anymore.
Well, and that's really it. Of the $300,000, I mean, $100,000 of that is to China. And so,
but they're really going to reduce the debt, is what I understand.
Well, that's so all the talk was, how are we going to stop this, and what's the ceiling about, and how do we make our adjustments? So the spending of $75,000 has now been reduced, or that's the plan to reduce it down to $72,000 a year.
Oh, that's huge.
So you're still making $58,000, but instead of spending $75,000, you're only going to spend $72,000, and that's what all this is about. It's not the big hope that we had hoped for, or the difference that it's going to make. We're not on a different plan or looking to change course. And our biggest creditor is China. And my daughter asked me, she just graduated from Matamidi High School, and she's going off to Hamlin in the fall. And she's going, and we're explaining our system and how we, the money, and she goes, Dad, if capitalism is so much better than communism, why do we borrow all our money from them?
Oh gosh, I don't want to touch that one. I'll tell you what though, I love the way you boiled it down from the big numbers that people tend to shut down when they hear and not even analyze what they really mean, a billion, a trillion, I don't know, But when you bring it down to real numbers, if you take a look at a family, imagine, I mean, forget the overspending, $58,000 a year. A typical scenario when somebody comes to me, when a person has debt, they have three options. They can pay all the money, shut up, and preserve their credit, or they can negotiate as a percentage, or they wind up having to go in the bankruptcy direction. The tipping scale in a bankruptcy direction for I and the bankruptcy attorneys that I work with is oftentimes going to be when your gross income is exceeded by the outstanding unsecured debt that you've got, which means if you've got a gross revenue stream of $58,000 per year, and remember, that's not take-home pay. That's why we talked with Arliss about the actual tax liabilities. That's not take-home pay. That's gross. And your unsecured debt is in excess of that, that's when we immediately start looking into the bankruptcy direction.
That is gross.
Yeah, man. And let's now look at what has just been said. We're talking about a family that makes $58,000 a year that has $327,000 in debt. And oh wow, they're only going to scale their current outgo from $75,000 to $72,000, which means they're going to incur over the next 10 years an additional $140,000 of additional debt, which means in 10 years we'll have scaled the debt down to, listen, aren't really going to scale it back. It will now be $467,000. How absurd is this? And so if a consumer or a client came to me with this, and this was my plan to help them, I mean, I'd be out of business tomorrow. This is absurd beyond imagination.
We'll make more money.
Yeah, we'll just make more money. No, we don't need to make money. We just print more money, right?
Right.
Well,
even better.
You know? There's that, and it's funny, Todd, you stumble on something really, really interesting there. I mean, this does not fit the model of a power budget, which is what Craig says that you always design for people. And all kidding aside, the government has so many stumbling blocks to actually dealing with what you guys just described in very understandable terms. They've got political parties, they've got entitlements, they've got all of that different stuff. But luckily, individuals don't have that. They've got you guys.
Well, and the funny part about it is that you'll hear people who are economists and people who are the statisticians and looking at all the numbers, and they'll say, but that's, an individual shouldn't have debt, but for a government, that's okay. What? Why is that? Well, because the government is a government. No. Here's part of the problem. It'll always be this way. And it is that when you're spending other people's money, you're never going to be a steward of the money in the same way as when it's your own money. One of the things that we've learned in money management over the last 25 years is that the further removed a person is from the physicality of the money, meaning that they're using credit cards or they're using check cards, as opposed to peeling out dollar bills, the more likely they are to overspend on their discretionary items. That's something that's been known by banks for a long time. That's why anybody who actually uses cash is looked upon as some type of relic, because of course the whole media has focused on making people feel uncomfortable about using cash. But let's get real. People who use their own real cash spend less money because they're more concerned with it. When you're spending other people's money, you're never going to be a steward of the money in the way that it is coming out of your own back pocket, period.
Well, especially with our current political situation where our politicians think in election cycles. It's about a 2-year or 4-year, where our global competitors think in decades and centuries, and we're thinking in 2-year blocks, and we're almost buying voters with this money. And there's a cost to that. When your credit gets downgraded, just like with a family, when your credit rating gets lowered, things cost more. Todd, speak to how credit ratings affect us so much.
Well, because whatever the debt service is, whatever it is that you're actually paying on the debt, is invariably going to go up. People live on credit. When I talk with consumers, I'll often say, just because you've never missed a payment doesn't mean you know how to manage your money. If a person becomes uncomfortable with debt and they can go and refinance a house and pay down their unsecured debt, well, that's great. They never missed a single payment, but it certainly doesn't mean that they're managing their money properly. And in my lifetime, at the age of a little over 50, I can tell you that in my lifetime, I've watched people's homes double in value twice. If we go back even prior to 2006, yet even prior to 2006, you had people who had watched their houses double in value twice, but they had virtually no equity. Now, they could console themselves by saying they'd never missed a single payment, but the reality is they certainly didn't manage their money well. They've been overspending their incomes their entire lifetime and using their home's equity to subsidize that. Our government subsidizes by simply printing more dollars. And the idea that we should become accustomed to and accepting of this ever-increasing debt as though it's just a part of life. Look, I guess if you tell yourself a lie long enough, eventually it becomes okay, I guess.
Or not.
One thing I'd like to add to that, Todd, when you talked about people using their houses for equity, the biggest downfall that clients that come to me when they're looking at doing a short sale or looking at having a foreclosure is that debt forgiveness on their house. And they go, well, yeah, but I heard that, that debt is forgiven because it's all my principal residence. That is a big mistake. Mm-hmm. And clients out there need to understand that the debt that gets forgiven that's not taxable income to you is only to the extent that it was actually used to purchase or rebuild or add on to your existing home. So anytime you've taken a second and used it for a vacation or a wedding or college, that forgiveness that's going to happen on that short sale or on that foreclosure will be taxable income to you.
Absolutely. So, I hear the exact same thing. I'll hear somebody come to me and say, well, I know I don't have any problem with tax liability because it's my primary residence. And I say, really? Where'd you hear that from? Well, my insurance agent told me that, or my real estate agent told me that. And I say the first thing I ask them is, I say, so what's your basis? And they look at me perplexed, and I say, you understand that the basis is the thing that's going to determine whether or not you have tax liability or not. And they don't even have a clue what you're talking about. So that tells you how little they actually understand.
You just started talking a foreign language.
I know.
Exactly. This is on account of the CPA. Arliss Richardson, CPA, thank you so much for being here. Craig Nestor, I know you've got a shout out this week for Cover Your Assets crew.
Just want to shout out real quick to Ryan O'Neill. Ryan O'Neill, one of the piano-playing O'Neill brothers.
Yes, he is.
Also the host of the Minnesota Real Estate Show. And without Ryan O'Neill and the Minnesota Real Estate Show, I don't know if this show is here. Kelly, you're also on that show, and I'm a frequent guest there. And Ryan O'Neill has really helped us grow this show and given us a lot of training and support. And also the broker of the Minnesota Real Estate team, where Derek and Jason are player coaches. So just a shout out to Ryan O'Neill, who's helped some careers and really supported us, making a difference for families out in the marketplace today.
Absolutely. So Cover Your Assets team, one more time for people just joining us. Craig Nestor, your foreclosure defense, just real quick, what do you do again?
We want to help people the question I get the most, do I make my next payment? Let's look at the grease board and figure out what all your moves are.
And Todd, exclusive access?
My people are the folks who haven't missed a payment and don't know what decision to make, what options to take, and want a holistic, comprehensive plan that addresses every aspect. My job is to know all of these things and then direct it to the proper professionals for the help that they need to execute a plan.
And none of the advice that you give has commission attached to it. It's an entirely different way. And Derek Walgrave.
Representation. That is absolutely key. Selling or buying a home, you need representation, and it needs to come from the right source.
It does. Whether you're an investor trying to take advantage of all the great deals right now, or you're somebody who might be in crisis and need a short sale, 855-835-8500 works for you 24/7 all week long. 855-835-8500. And don't forget, if you go to coveryourassets21.com, you can also possibly line up the guys to come to your church, your office, sit and talk to you. Cover Your Assets will be back next Saturday. Have a great, safe weekend.